Malik felt the air in the courtroom press down on him, thick and suffocating like a wool blanket in summer. It wasn't the number of people, but the weight of their judgment, a silent consensus that seemed to have been reached long before he'd even walked through the heavy oak doors. He sat beside his court-appointed lawyer, a young man who looked perpetually frazzled, his suit a size too big. Across the aisle, Jessica, his ex-wife, sat composed, her expression a careful mask of concern that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her lawyer was the opposite of his own, sharp, tailored, and radiating a predatory confidence. For 6 years, Malik's world had revolved around his son, Leo. He worked from home as a freelance graphic designer, a career choice he'd made specifically to be present. He was the one who kissed scraped knees, who knew that Leo liked his sandwiches cut into triangles but not rectangles, who could mimic the exact roar of a T-Rex to perfection. His apartment walls were a gallery of Leo's artistic phases, from the early crayon squiggles to the more recent, surprisingly detailed drawings of superheroes. Their life was a quiet symphony of routine and love, a world built for two. The separation had shattered that symphony. Jessica had called his devotion a lack of ambition. His choice to prioritize fatherhood over climbing a corporate ladder was, in her narrative, a sign of instability, a weakness. Now, in this cold, imposing room, that narrative was being weaponized against him. He clutched a small stack of papers in his lap. They were his testimony, his proof. He had photos of the Halloween costumes he'd sewn by hand, a letter from Leo's kindergarten teacher praising his consistent involvement, printouts of emails coordinating doctor's appointments. It was the mundane, tangible evidence of his life as a father, and he held onto it like a holy text. The father, Mr. Malik, has shown a pattern of emotional volatility. Jessica's lawyer was saying, his voice smooth and condescending. He is, by his own admission, a struggling artist. We contend that the child needs a stable, structured environment, which my client, a successful marketing executive, is uniquely positioned to provide. Malik felt a hot surge of anger. Struggling artist? He had a steady stream of clients and had designed logos for 3 local businesses just last month. He started to lean forward to whisper to his lawyer, but the man gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of his head. Wait your turn. The judge, a man named Albright with a sour, downturned mouth and tired eyes, scanned the documents before him. He sighed, a sound of profound boredom, as if this entire proceeding was an irritating delay in his lunch plans. He looked over his spectacles at Malik. Your turn, Mr. Malik, the judge said, his tone already laced with impatience. Malik stood, his knees feeling weak. He cleared his throat. Your Honor, my son Leo is my entire world. For the past 6 years. Yes, we've heard the preliminaries. Judge Albright cut in, waving a dismissive hand. Let's get to the point. Your ex-wife's counsel raises concerns about your emotional fitness. Your response. The question was a trap, and he knew it. How do you defend your own heart? My emotions are that of a father who loves his son, Malik said, trying to keep his voice steady. I am passionate about his well-being. I believe that's a strength, not a weakness. If you would just look at the evidence I've brought. I'm not interested in your scrapbook, Mr. Malik, the judge snapped. I am interested in facts. Is it not a fact that you had a public altercation with your ex-wife 3 months ago? She showed up at my door demanding I hand over Leo on a day that wasn't hers. Yelling in front of him, Malik explained, his voice rising slightly with the memory of his own helplessness. I asked her to lower her voice. I was protecting my son from a scene. I was being a parent. So you admit you were emotional? The judge stated, leaning back as if he'd just proven a complex theorem. I was concerned. I was upset that she was upsetting our child. Malik stammered, feeling the ground crumble beneath him. He was being twisted into a caricature. You see, Judge Albright said, looking at Jessica's lawyer with a small, affirming nod. He then fixed his gaze back on Malik. Parenting requires a level head. It requires calm, rational decision-making, not passion. He said the word passion as if it were a communicable disease. I'm seeing a man in front of me who seems altogether too emotional to be a primary guardian. The words hit Malik like a physical blow. Too emotional. The very core of his love for Leo, the fierce, protective fire in his chest, was being used as the reason to take him away. He tried to speak again, to redirect to his carefully prepared notes, to the teacher's letter, to anything that would prove his worth. Your Honor, please. I just want to show you who I am as a father. But the judge was done. He held up a hand, a gesture of finality that was more powerful than any gavel. I've heard enough. I've seen this pattern 1,000 times. An unstable home environment is detrimental to a child's development. He didn't look at Malik. He didn't look at Jessica. He looked at a fixed point on the wall behind them, as if reading from an invisible script he had long since memorized. Therefore, this court grants full legal and physical custody to the mother, Jessica Miller. Mr. Malik will be granted supervised visitation every other weekend. We are adjourned. The gavel struck the wood block. The sound was a crack of thunder that split Malik's world in two. For a moment, he couldn't process it. Full custody. Supervised visitation. The words echoed in the sudden silence of the courtroom. It was a death sentence to his life with Leo. He looked at Jessica, who was now quietly accepting a hug from her lawyer, that mask of concern replaced with a faint, triumphant smile. He felt a tremor start in his hands, a deep, seismic rattling that came from the very center of his being. The carefully constructed dam of his composure, the one he had fought so hard to maintain against the judge's provocations, finally broke. A sob escaped him, a raw, ragged sound of pure agony. It wasn't a cry. It was a howl of injustice. No, he whispered, then louder, no. He lurched forward, his stack of papers scattering across the floor like forgotten memories. You didn't even listen, he yelled, his voice cracking, pointing a shaking finger toward the judge's bench. You didn't even look. Immediately, 2 bailiffs were on him, their hands firm on his arms. They were big men, their faces impassive, just doing their job. They began to pull him away, back toward the doors, back toward a life without his son. The motion was swift, efficient. He was being erased. The desperation was a clawing animal inside his chest. He was losing. He had lost. His evidence, his preparation, his quiet, steady love. None of it mattered. They were taking him away, and they didn't even know what they were taking. And that's when he shouted. It wasn't a plea to the judge anymore. It was a desperate broadcast to the universe, to anyone who would hear. Ask her, he roared, his voice echoing in the suddenly silent room. He twisted against the bailiff's grip, his eyes locked on Jessica. Ask her who packed his lunches for 6 years. Every single day. He could feel the burn of tears on his face, hot and shameful, but he didn't care. Ask her who taught him how to tie his shoes, who sat on the floor with him for a week with that stupid bunny ears rhyme until he got it right. The bailiffs grunted, pulling him harder toward the exit. The courtroom was a blur of shocked faces. Ask her who knows that he's terrified of spiders but fascinated by worms. Ask her who held him all night when he had that fever of 103, who cleaned up the mess, who stayed awake. His voice broke on a sob. Who did that? It was me. It was always me. In the third row of the gallery, a young paralegal named Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She had seen dismissive judges before, but this was different. This was a man being flayed alive, his fatherhood invalidated because he dared to show he cared. Without thinking, her hand, already holding her phone, came up. She pressed record. She captured the last 10 seconds. The raw, anguished cry of a father being dragged away, shouting the small, sacred details of his love. He was hauled out of the courtroom, the heavy doors swinging shut behind him, muffling his final, desperate sobs. The room was left in a stunned, uncomfortable silence. Judge Albright, for the first time, looked flustered, his face flushed with anger at the outburst. Jessica stared at the doors, her triumphant expression having vanished, replaced by something colder, more uncertain. Sarah looked down at the video on her phone, the shaky footage, the heart-wrenching audio. She felt a profound sense of wrongness. A few taps, a caption typed with trembling fingers. This father was called too emotional and wasn't allowed to present his side in a custody hearing. The judge gave the mother full custody. This was his reaction. Is this justice? She added a hashtag #LetDadsBeDads and posted it. She had no idea what she had just done. Malik spent the next hour on a cold bench in the courthouse hallway, feeling hollowed out. His lawyer offered him a bottle of water and mumbled something about an appeal, but the words were meaningless. An appeal could take months, years. Leo would be gone. The daily rhythm of their life was already broken. The silence in his apartment would be deafening. When he finally managed to drag himself home, his phone began to buzz. It was a friend from college. Malik, are you okay? I just saw a video. Then another buzz. An old neighbor. Malik, my God. Is that you? We're all sharing it. It's horrible. What they did. He opened his social media apps, and his world tilted on its axis again. Sarah's post was exploding. It had 1,000 shares. Then 10,000. Then 100,000. The number was climbing so fast it seemed unreal. His raw, broken plea in the courtroom was ricocheting across the internet. Comments poured in by the thousands. My ex tried this. They use emotion as a weapon against good fathers. Who packed the lunches? That broke my heart. That's real parenting. Judge Albright of the 12th District Court needs to be investigated. This is judicial malpractice. I'm a mother, and my heart aches for this man. That woman's face says it all. People started digging. They found Judge Albright's history of similar rulings, his known bias. They found Jessica's pristine social media, filled with photos of her and Leo on glamorous vacations, none of which showed the daily grind of parenting. The contrast was stark. The hashtag had changed. Now it was #JusticeForMalik. By the next morning, 24 hours after his world had ended, it had been reborn in fire. The video had 12 million views. It was on national news websites. Local news vans were parked outside his apartment building. He was terrified. He felt exposed, his most vulnerable moment laid bare for the world to see. But beneath the terror, a tiny, fragile seed of hope began to sprout. They heard him. The judge hadn't listened, but millions of strangers had. They understood that packed lunches and tied shoelaces weren't trivial details. They were the language of love. The most significant change came in the form of an email with the subject line, "Your case pro bono representation." It was from Evelyn Reed, a name Malik recognized immediately. She was a legendary family law attorney, a fierce advocate known for taking on corrupt systems. She was a dragon, and she only fought for causes she believed in. The email was brief. Mr. Malik, I saw the video. My team and I believe you have grounds for an immediate emergency appeal based on judicial misconduct. We would be honored to represent you at no cost. Please call my office. Malik stared at the email, reading it 3 times. Pro bono. Evelyn Reed. Hope was no longer a fragile seed. It was a floodlight. He made the call. Evelyn Reed's voice was exactly as he'd imagined. Calm, sharp, and radiating a confidence that was rooted not in arrogance, but in competence. Malik, she said, dispensing with formalities. What happened to you was a disgrace, but their mistake was creating evidence. Your voice is now the loudest thing in the room. We are going to file an emergency motion to vacate Judge Albright's ruling. And we are going to win. For the first time in months, Malik believed it. The next few days were a blur of activity. Evelyn's team descended like a legal special forces unit. They collected all the evidence Malik had tried to present, the photos, the letters, the emails. They interviewed Leo's teachers, his pediatrician, his neighbors. They built a mountain of proof, a fortress of facts around the emotional core of his love. They found Sarah, the paralegal, who gave a sworn affidavit about the judge's demeanor throughout the entire hearing. Jessica, meanwhile, was wilting under the public scrutiny. Her attempts to defend herself on social media had backfired spectacularly, with thousands of commenters pointing out the inconsistencies in her story. Her lawyer, once so smug, was now frantically fielding calls from the media. Judge Albright had been temporarily reassigned pending a formal investigation by the state's Judicial Review Board. The system was being forced to look in the mirror. The emergency hearing was scheduled before a senior appellate judge, a woman with a reputation for being tough but fair. The courtroom was packed, not just with lawyers and press, but with fathers who had driven from neighboring states, wearing shirts that said #InnerCircle. They stood in silent solidarity. This time, Malik sat beside Evelyn Reed. He was still nervous, but it was a different kind of anxiety. It was the energy of a fighter stepping into the ring, not a victim walking to the gallows. Jessica's lawyer tried to frame the video as a calculated stunt, a display of the very instability they'd warned about. "He is manipulating public sympathy," he argued weakly. Evelyn Reed rose, calm and deliberate. She walked to the center of the courtroom. "Your Honor," she began, her voice filling the space. "The defense claims Mr. Malik is manipulative. I agree. He has masterfully manipulated a peanut butter and jelly sandwich into a perfect triangle every day for 6 years. He has manipulated a shoelace into a bunny ear knot. He has manipulated bedtime stories into dreams and fevers into comfort." She paused, letting the words sink in. What happened in Judge Albright's courtroom was not a stunt. It was the sound a heart makes when it is unjustly broken. It was the desperate cry of a parent who was denied the fundamental right to be heard. She turned to Malik. "Mr. Malik was called too emotional. Let us be clear. The emotion he displayed is the very proof of his bond. Would we prefer a father who felt nothing? A father who could lose his child and simply nod, collected and rational? That is not a good parent. That is a sociopath." A murmur went through the courtroom. The appellate judge watched Evelyn, her expression unreadable but intensely focused. "The court has before it over 100 pages of evidence that Judge Albright refused to see," Evelyn continued. "Testimonials, photographs, school records. But the most powerful piece of evidence is still that video, because it proves two things. First, the clear and demonstrable bias of a judge who failed his duty. And second, it reveals the truth of a father's love in a way no legal document ever could." She looked directly at the judge. "We are asking the court to vacate the previous ruling and restore temporary shared custody to Mr. Malik, pending a new, fair trial. Because justice should not depend on who has the slickest lawyer or who can best suppress their humanity. It should depend on the truth. And the truth is, Malik is a good father, an excellent father, the kind of father any child would be lucky to have." She sat down. The silence in the room was absolute. The judge looked over the motion, then at Malik, then at Jessica. Her composed mask was gone, replaced by a look of genuine panic. The judge cleared her throat. "This court has reviewed the motion and the attached exhibits, including the affidavit from the witness. The footage of the incident is, to put it mildly, deeply disturbing. A parent's emotion, particularly in the face of losing a child, is not a sign of instability. It is a sign of attachment." She fixed her gaze on Jessica's lawyer. The failure of the lower court to review presented evidence, and the clear bias demonstrated by the presiding judge constitute a grievous judicial error. She then looked at Malik, and for the first time in a courtroom he felt seen. "The ruling of the 12th District Court is hereby vacated. An order for a new trial before a different judge is granted. Effective immediately, temporary joint physical and legal custody is restored, reverting to the 50-50 arrangement in place prior to the hearing. Mr. Malik, you may pick up your son from school this afternoon." A wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled his knees washed over Malik. He slumped in his chair, and Evelyn Reed placed a firm, steadying hand on his shoulder. Outside, a cheer erupted from the fathers who had been waiting. The reunion with Leo was everything. Malik waited outside the school, his heart pounding. When the bell rang, Leo came bursting out the doors, saw him, and his face lit up in pure, unadulterated joy. "Daddy!" he screamed, running full tilt and launching himself into Malik's arms. Malik held him tight, burying his face in his son's hair, inhaling the familiar scent of playground dirt and apple juice. He was crying again, But these were not tears of anguish. They were tears of gratitude, of homecoming. "I got you, buddy," he whispered. "I got you." In the weeks that followed, the world settled into a new kind of normal. Judge Albright was forced into early retirement after the Judicial Review Board found a pattern of misconduct. Jessica, facing a new trial without a biased judge and with overwhelming public opinion against her, agreed to a permanent, fair 50-50 custody arrangement through mediation. Her power had been predicated on a system that would listen only to her, and when that system was held accountable, her narrative collapsed. Malik's story became a touchstone for a national conversation about parental rights and gender bias in family court. He was invited onto news programs and podcasts, not as a celebrity, but as a voice for the voiceless. He was shy and soft-spoken, but when he talked about Leo, about the importance of the small, everyday acts of love, his words carried an undeniable power. With Evelyn's help, he and Sarah, the paralegal who filmed the video, started a small nonprofit called the Lunchbox Foundation, dedicated to providing legal resources for low-income fathers facing biased custody battles. His life was no longer quiet, but it was full. He still packed Leo's lunch every morning they were together, and he still checked to make sure his shoes were tied properly. These were not chores. They were rituals. They were the foundation of his world. He had been shamed for his love, and in the end, that very love had been his salvation. It served as a powerful reminder to everyone who heard his story. Parents' heart is not a liability. Their emotion is not a weakness. It is the curriculum vitae of their love, a record of every sleepless night, every packed lunch, every tied shoelace. It is the most powerful evidence there is. And in a world that so often tries to silence it, we must learn to listen to its roar.